I saw this firsthand with a prospective client a year ago. He was 61 years old, $2.9 million saved, 2 years from retirement. He came in with a thick binder of his advisor's plan, a Monte Carlo analysis, which showed a 94% probability of success through age 90. He was proud of it. His advisor was proud of it. It looked authoritative. When we ran the actual after-tax numbers, accounting for the tax drag on his traditional 401k withdrawals, the real cost of healthcare inflation in his 70s, and what his income would look like when RMD stacked on top of Social Security, his projected monthly income was $2,400 a month lower than what his plan showed. Every month for the rest of his retirement, that's nearly $30,000 annually. Not because his advisor made a mistake, but because the model they used was wrong for his situation. It was built for someone with $500,000 saved and completely wrong for someone with $3 million in pre-tax accounts. I'm Ryan Knoll, founder of Nav Wealth, a firm that helps people near retirement make smart money decisions. Today I'm going to show you the two assumptions inside most retirement projections that are silently understating your tax exposure and overstating your purchasing power. The three questions you should be asking your advisor before you finalize any retirement number. If you have a retirement projection and you've never questioned the assumptions inside of it, this video is for you. If your retirement plan has a probability of success number in it and nobody has explained what that number actually assumes, that gap is exactly what this channel addresses. Hit subscribe. We do this type of stuff every week. The biggest problem with most retirement plans isn't the market, it's taxes. The client I mentioned earlier, his plan overstated his spendable income by $600,000 over 20 years. Monte Carlo analysis tests market scenarios, not after-tax outcomes. A 94% success rate means 940 out of 1,000 simulated futures ended with money left. It sounds rigorous, and it is for what it measures, market performance. It completely excludes the impact of taxes. The projection shows what you withdraw, the amount taken out before tax. It does not calculate what you can spend, which is the amount that actually funds your life after the IRS takes its share. For someone with most of their retirement savings in a Roth IRA or taxable account, this gap is small. The withdrawals are largely tax-free or tax efficient. For someone with $2 to $3 million in a traditional 401k, which describes most people at this asset level, this gap is not small. Every dollar withdrawn from the 401k is ordinary income, taxed at your marginal rate, stacked on top of Social Security, stacked on top of investment income. A projection that shows $120,000 per year in withdrawals and calls that your income is overstating your spendable income by $25,000 to $35,000 annually. That's not a rounding error, that's a lifestyle adjustment. Now here's the compounding problem. The Monte Carlo model runs thousands of scenarios and finds 94% of them successful. But successful means the portfolio didn't run out even at the cost of nearly $600,000 over 2 decades. The 94% probability asks, will I run out of money? Not how does this affect my lifestyle? For someone with $2 to $5 million in pre-tax accounts, those are two very different questions, and most projections only answer one of them. The second wrong assumption is simpler, but just as expensive. Most retirement projections use a single inflation rate to model the rising cost of living over a 20 or 30-year retirement. That rate is typically 2.5% to 3%, roughly in line with the Federal Reserve's target and recent historical averages for general consumer prices. General inflation at 2.5% to 3% is a reasonable assumption for most spending categories: groceries, utilities, entertainment, travel. It's not a reasonable assumption, though, for your healthcare expenses. Healthcare costs for retirees have historically inflated at 5% to 6% per year, more than twice the general rate. And that Monte Carlo analysis assumes it grows at the same rate as your groceries. For a couple in their 70s, this is often already the biggest expense. Assigning the wrong inflation rate to your largest expense throws the entire plan out of balance. Here's what that difference looks like in dollars. A couple spending $18,000 per year on healthcare at 65 faces a very different number at 80 depending on which inflation rate their plan used. At 3% inflation, $18,000 becomes $28,000 by age 80, an increase of $10,000 per year. At 5.5% inflation, $18,000 becomes $38,500 by age 80, an increase of $20,500 per year. The difference between those two projections, the wrong inflation assumption versus the right one, is $10,500 per year at age 80, growing every year after that. Your income doesn't just feel tighter, it is tighter. Over a 15-year period from 65 to 80, the cumulative underinvestment from using general inflation instead of healthcare inflation is approximately $90,000 to $120,000. That is not a rounding error. It's a budget gap that appears gradually, a few $100s per month in your late 60s, a few $1,000s per month in your late 70s, and is almost never visible in the original projection because it was never modeled correctly. This leads to higher withdrawals to cover the cost and can increase your tax burden, making your gap even worse. If you have a retirement projection and you're not sure what inflation rate it uses for healthcare or whether it models after-tax income, I put together a free resource called the $3 million Retirement Readiness Scorecard. 10 questions. Most people can't answer all of them. Link is in the description. If your plan gets these 3 questions wrong, the numbers you are relying on are off by tens of thousands of dollars per year. So go ask your advisor each one and see how these are factored into their analysis. Question 1. Does this projection show what I take out or what I get to spend? If the answer is gross withdrawals, or if your advisor isn't sure, the projection is overstating your spendable income. Ask them to rebuild the income line on an after-tax basis, accounting for the marginal rate on 401k withdrawals, Social Security taxation, and IRMAA surcharges. For most people at this asset level, the after-tax number is 18 to 28% lower than the gross number. Question 2. Are you using a different rate for healthcare expenses? If the answer is a single blended rate of 2.5% to 3%, the projection is understating your healthcare costs in your 70s and 80s. Ask them to model healthcare at 5 to 5.5% separately from general living expenses. The difference in your projected budget at age 80 will be significant. Question 3. What happens if markets drop 30% in retirement? A Monte Carlo model shows probability across thousands of scenarios, but the scenario that matters most is a bad sequence early. Ask your advisor to show you the specific drawdown path. If markets drop 30% in the first 2 years, what is the after-tax monthly income at age 75? At age 80? That single scenario, not the probability headline, tells you whether your plan is genuinely resilient or just statistically optimistic. Those 3 questions take 20 minutes to answer, and most advisors don't volunteer this information. You need to ask them. The gap between a projection that handles all 3 correctly and one that doesn't can exceed $50,000 per year in your 70s, every year compounding for the length of your retirement. A retirement projection that shows 94% probability of success is not wrong, it's just incomplete, and the gaps are largest for people at the $2 to $5 million level, where tax drag and healthcare costs are both significantly higher than the assumptions most projections use. For many people, this is off by $2,400 every month for the rest of their lives. What could you do with an extra $2,400 each month? The projection your advisor built is likely accurate for what it models. The question is whether it will cost you 6 figures over your retirement. If you want to run those 3 questions through your specific plan, your accounts, your tax situation, your healthcare cost baseline, that's exactly the conversation that belongs on my calendar. The link is in the description. And if this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who has a retirement projection they've never looked behind. Most people trust the headline number without ever asking what it assumes, because the smartest thing you can do with $3 million is make sure every decision counts. See you in the next video.